I just recently sent over 4 of my images to pro wildlife photographers to edit. I asked them to choose 2 of the 4 to edit and send them back to me so I could compare the results across the board. In this second video of a 2-part series, I'll be revealing the editing workflows of pro wildlife photographers by showing their editing techniques on camera that you may never get to see. My hope for this video is to help us all learn new things that we may not already know and to help take your wildlife photography images to the next level. All right, and so we're going into Sergius's image of the crow. Let me make sure the playback speed is doubled here. Sergius's image of the crow. So this edit first, he decided to edit the oyster catcher in this one. So this will be fun to watch. All right, so Sergius is in Lightroom. I also, to give credit to people who kind of need to be, I don't know, I told them originally, really all I was mostly focusing on was going to be Lightroom, but I wound up getting a lot of Photoshop submitted to me, Topaz, stuff like that. So I'm just kind of throwing it all in, even though I requested only Lightroom at the beginning. So any of the people who maybe just are doing Lightroom, that may have been due to my request originally. So some of them also use outside techniques, but maybe just were limiting themselves in this situation. But very cool to see regardless. So let's see how Sergius is doing this. So he's starting off with some HSLs. A second ago, he started off with kind of his basic exposure stuff. As you can see, his highlights, shadows, kind of, what he kind of did was flatten the image while still keeping a lot of pop in the whites, which I like that. What I think he's also really doing with his HSLs is making sure he likes that water in the background. That's what he seems to be really starting his focus on, is making sure he likes the water in the background. So that's one different style. So let's pause this for a second. That's one different style too. Like, right, you have 2 ways that you can approach it. As an editor, you can approach it by trying to figure out your subject first and figuring out how do I make sure that the subject is correct and then add on to it with the background next. Or you can start by setting up the scene of the whole image, the aesthetic of the whole image, and then adjusting the subject on top of that. And that seems to be the approach he went for more right here. Is he starts with, how can I make this whole image look like how I want it? And then how can I adjust the subject on top of that to help it complement that scene? So let's go into the masking that he's doing. He's doing a subject mask. Very cool. So he's bringing out a lot of contrast in this crow. A lot. He's also brought up, as you can see, brought up some clarity, texture, stuff like that. And I think that's to really help bring out that feather detail that might have been missing if he didn't do that. So I like that decision there. A good decision. So now he's going to be doing some bringing out the exposure on the eye specifically. So he selected that eye with a mask, popped out that white. That way you get a little bit of that rim on the top of that eye right there. Just helps you find the eye a little bit better as a viewer, so I like that. He makes sure that he's on a thirds in his cropping. I like that. Interesting. Okay, so now he's going to throw in a linear gradient to kind of help fade it from dark to light as you kind of move across the frame. He gives kind of a lighting direction to it with that radial filter. I like that. Adds a little bit more to it, right, than if you were just to view it as a flat background in your image. So, interesting choice there. I like it. This is definitely a much, much more moody type of edit. I like what you get to see about Sergius here too, and this is something I always do, is I'm always doing that before and after as I'm editing. I'm always seeing what's this transformation looking like, and I really like that. I think that's a really helpful tool because it helps me stay a little bit more accurate to what I wanted to achieve and what I was going for, and not like manipulate it so far that I don't really like how far I've manipulated it. Because sometimes when I fail to do that before and after, I wind up going so far out creatively that I'm like, wow, I can't even really recognize this anymore. So I do a lot of that too, and I like how you're seeing that he's just constantly clicking that before, after. So that's pretty cool. I was creating a little custom mask here. So he's giving a little bit of like an accent light onto that crow, and I like that. His eye detail is really good on this crow. I like those decisions that he's making there. Doing some final minor touches and adjustments, it looks like. Good stuff. Okay, now he's bringing it into Topaz denoise. I think he's going to do some denoising around it. Yep. Topaz denoise, man, amazing tool. I love the Topaz products. You guys know that. But geez, yeah, Topaz products are just absolutely phenomenal. What they can do so easily. So I like it. Just applying it to it. Going to send it back to his editing. And he's done. So now we're pulling up Sergius's oyster catcher image, and or I should say my oyster catcher image, but Sergius is going to be editing it this time, so this will be fun. Jamin edited this one earlier. Now we're going to get to see the difference between the two. So we know that Jamin went for a little bit more uniform of a background. We'll see what Sergius winds up deciding. Sergius seems to be going for the same kind of sharp contrast, at least so far. It's kind of doing a flip up in that tone curve at the end. I like that decision. Okay, so it looks like he's testing out. So he was testing out going warm, but it looks like he might be going for a black and white. So this will be fun. So I think if I'm not speaking too soon for Sergius, but I think what he's maybe going for is kind of like a vibe of like he recognizes that the exposure differences are much more essential to the creativity of this image than the colors. And so that's really what it seems like he's wanting to focus on, is how can I really bring out the exposure here. So he just goes for a grayscale right away. That way we're not even worrying about the color, and we're just worrying about how can I bring out the main feature of this image, which is the dynamics in the exposure. So interesting choice there. Very much. Yeah, very much bringing out that contrast a lot. I like how in that mask one at the bottom, he really makes sure that all those rocks are just pulled back so they're not distracting. You don't get too many little rim lights on it, which was actually the same thing I did. So in my image, I made sure that all those little rim lights on the rocks that were accidentally in the frame or showing down there, I just took them out. So I was on the same board or same page there. It's interesting. That was a very quick edit. Oh, he's not done yet. I thought he was about to be done. I was like, wow, that was quick. But I mean, it's looking pretty good already. Let's see what he does. So it looks like, yeah, I was like, what is that little stripe doing going across the ring? I was like, okay, that's making sense. That's cool. And then, boom. No, that's good though. So it looks like he's trying to actually. So this is interesting. As opposed to what Jamin was seeing that kind of the detail in the bokeh and liking it and trying to see how we can retain more of that. Sergius is going the opposite route of trying to get that out of it. So again, that's kind of, so I'll pause here for a second. That's kind of like an interesting showing of some people are maybe wanting to bring out a little bit more of those little fine details and kind of make them more a feature of the image, versus Sergius is seeming to want to isolate those a little bit more and get those out of here. That way you don't get distracted from some of the other elements of the image. So that's an interesting difference between those two there. Just two different ways to do it. Not a right or a wrong, just two different ways. He's bringing up that wave a little bit more, which I like that, to make sure that the wave is still a prominent part of the image. Yeah, but also at the same time making sure that it's contrasted enough to where you don't lose it in the brightness. So far pretty cool. I like this. This is definitely an image too. This one in particular, I feel like is an image where you could play with this one for a long time. Because there's so much you could do to it, you just aren't sure if you should do it to it. Okay, so let's see what he decides to do with... Okay, so he's going to... That's an interesting choice. I like that. I like that mask there that he's doing. So that's a kind of a unique and creative mask, right? He's creating what he did was create a radial mask around the oyster catcher. But then after that, he does a mask of the subject and inverts it to where no longer are you selecting the silhouette, because he doesn't want to select that silhouette. So what he's going to do is brighten the area around it. That way it pops the silhouette a little bit more, but doesn't accidentally bring the exposure back on the bird. So very creative choice there. I like that. Also brings down the clarity. That way it keeps it a little bit less sharp in the detail approaching that silhouette. So it really helps to, again, isolate that bird a little bit more. So now he's throwing this one into denoise, just like he did the crow before. So now he's out in denoise. See what he's going to decide to do to it. He's just going for the low light right out the bat. Nice and easy. Denoise is pretty smart. I mean, a lot of times they'll just kind of nail it right off the bat, and you're like, yeah, that looks pretty good. That's what I would have wanted. Man, their new photo AI, man, is just incredible. I mean, denoise is already really good, and the sharpen, I was using denoise and sharpen all the time before, but now that I have photo AI, I'm just like, geez, I don't even know if I'll ever wind up very often using denoise or sharpen very much, unless I had to do specific masking. That's still the thing that I don't necessarily like about photo AI, but photo AI just, phenomenal. Anyways, that's about it for this image. So awesome job by Sergius, and really like the results in this one. So Jamin Hunter Taylor is an awesome wildlife photographer out of Alaska, has some really great quality work, and he screen recorded his stuff, sent it back to me. But what's also kind of cool is I didn't ask him to do this, but he just kind of talked about it as well. So I'm going to be kind of having a reacts conversation to him as he's going through his screen recording and talking about what I like and what I'm noticing in it as well, in addition to hearing what his voice has to say. So let's start this off. I'm going to play it back at 2x speed. That way it's not too long, and we can get through it a little quicker.
So my friend Jeremy Knipe messages me and says, hey, do you want to try editing some of my photos? And I'll share them in a YouTube video coming up. And I thought to myself, that sounds like a fun idea. So I'm going to take a stab at editing up a couple of Jeremy's photos in my own way, how I would do mine, and I'm going to share them with you. So let's go ahead and dive right in. And I'm going to go ahead and get started in Camera Raw. So normally I start off in Adobe Lightroom Classic, and then I'll open things up in Photoshop and do any fine-tuning and that sort of thing. So I'm actually just going to kind of get started in Lightroom, or in Camera Raw here, because it's basically Lightroom inside Photoshop. So yeah, sounds fun. Let's go ahead and dive right in. I really like this really great silhouette. So you got the waves coming in here, you got some light bokeh happening back here. This just looks like a photo I think looks really fun to work with. So let's get started. I think we might do some contrasty stuff and some silhouette stuff and color stuff and just all kinds of stuff. So let's go. All right, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this, but let's do some cropping first. I'm just going to crop in just a little. Do I even want to crop? You know what? I'm not even going to crop this. I like it how it is. If I try to crop out, I think I'm going to lose some of the stuff that I don't want to lose. So
yeah, it's pretty good composition.
Instead, we're going to go into
right off the bat. So I agreed on that. I didn't crop mine at all either.
So let's try this linear gradient. I'm going to go something like that, and then I'm going to subtract some of that. I'm going to use this brush here and just kind of get rid of some of this flow. I need that to be. Here we go.
Interesting. Okay. So what he's doing is, because of that fade that was naturally there in the color in the shot, he's winding up kind of trying to mask it to kind of, I think, level that out, that kind of that difference in exposure and difference in color. So let's keep checking this out.
I'm just trying to get this wave here to be just a little, I want that to remain kind of this blue, but I want to.
Yeah, that wave was kind of the feature of this image. So I like how he's noticing that already.
And I think we're there. I think that is going to be just fine. So I'm going to increase the temperature there, and I'm going to actually get rid of the highlights too. Yeah, because I want to see what's going on there. I want to see those details. They're a little bit blown out, but it's fine. They're recoverable, so that's good. So let's throw in there some warmth. Let's get some warm color going. Maybe.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a little green, just because it's green ocean. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just playing with it, and seeing what we can do.
Interesting. Okay. Let's drop this down so what he's trying to do is actually create more of a contrast between that bright, or the area that was, I guess, further set back from the wave, and then the wave itself. So it looks like he's trying to actually kind of define that wave area a little bit more, and we're going to kind of see what he winds up doing with this.
Maybe plus 20 on the color? Yeah, something like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go into here. I'm going to duplicate and inverse the mask. I'm going to brighten up the exposure there. I need the exposure quite a bit lighter. And a little bit more blue. I don't know, this might be going totally off the rails. But it's fun.
Yep.
Okay, so
and a lot of editing is testing out what you like, what you're not liking, kind of playing with it as you're doing it, right? That's how you grow, and that's how you learn as a editor.
I don't know, you know what, let's... No, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm going to keep that mask. I'm going to keep that... I want to keep... Yeah, I'm going to get rid of that mask. Okay. Something like that.
Okay.
I am all over the place on this one, guys. Just trying to decide what I want to do. You know, you get something. It's much different when you are editing somebody else's photos.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is, when I'm editing my own photos, I have a vision for how it should look, right?
Yep.
So when I go into it, I'm thinking, ooh, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do with it. You know, this looks good. This looks right. And the problem with editing somebody else's photos, although it's fun to do, the problem it creates is that like you just don't know sometimes.
I love that. I'm going to pause that for a second. I love what Jamin just said right there, because that's really good. Because when I took this shot, I had a vision of how I already wanted it in my head. But what Jamin's saying is he doesn't know, he didn't have a vision for this shot because he didn't take it, right? So he's trying to figure out what is kind of the vision for the shot, and how do I bring out how does he bring out what he wants to bring out in this image? So he's trying to play with that, test that around. So you're seeing him doing a lot of masking to kind of figure out what it is that he wants to bring out, a lot of adjustments, and he's kind of doing them. He's undoing some parts because he's trying to figure that out. So we're going to just keep working with him through that as he's kind of figuring out what he wants to do.
How this is going to look,
I love it.
Or what the photographer had in mind for it. So I am just kind of seeing what I can do with this, It almost kind of looks all cool, kind of cold like that. I don't know. Looks kind of nice. Let's dial just a little bit of those highlights back. I don't want too much because I don't want these to get blown out, these little bokeh balls. I kind of like the blue, I think. Let's go totally blue on it.
Yeah, that's what I did. I like it.
Shadows. Ooh, nope, don't want to do that.
Yeah, don't want to do that. Good call there, Jamin.
Select subject. I'm going to add to it. I'm going to do color luminance range. And I'm going to get rid of all the white, lighter color. So
yeah, I like that.
Okay, so
that's
now
good.
I've got.
So it's creating a luminance mask in the darkest areas of it.
I'll drop the highlights on that. Okay.
And just making sure that those are pretty much essentially almost pitch black, it seems like. And then he inverts it, does all the opposite things, and he tries to bring out the highlights in those. So that's good.
Do like some of that green. So what happens if we bring out? Oh, there we go. Not too much, just a little. Blacks up just a little bit. I'm punching for a lot of contrast here. So that's what I'm working. I think that's like what I want to do with this. I think I'm going to create my own kind of bokeh right here. I'm going to go to clarity. Just a touch of clarity on there. Maybe it's too much. I'm going to drop that down to like 35. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Raise my exposure on that just a little bit. Something like that. Yeah, it's actually looking pretty good. What I want to do, I think I'm going to create this.
So essentially he's just trying to create a very, as he already mentioned, a very stark contrast between the darks and the light areas.
I want to bring a lot more focus to the bird.
Okay,
so, yeah,
let's see what he does here.
I think something like that is kind of cool. Let's change from Adobe Color to landscapes. Oh man, that brought in some punch. I really like that.
Yep.
A little bit of vibrance here. Look at all those blues. That's just cool. I think that was the right call. I was gonna try to go for like a warmth up here and kind of a cooler up here. How this wave comes in here, but I don't know. I think I like this a little bit better. I think I like this just kind of cool greens and blues that are going on in here. There's some really great colors.
Feels like it sets you in the scene.
I like that. I'm
really
gonna
well.
in Photoshop. I don't even know what I would do in Photoshop honestly. Other than I think I am going to just hit some of these highlights here and drop them down, and that's probably about it. Maybe. Ooh, that's terrible. That was a terrible idea. Drop down some of these highlights.
Again, you're playing around with it in editing.
Focus.
This is a lot of learning and editing, guys. I love it.
So, yeah,
love how you're getting
cool.
to see this raw process.
There's all kinds of cool stuff going on in this bokeh here. Some people call it bokeh.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Call it whatever you want.
that was one of the things that stood out to me about this image the most when I took it, was just all the little interesting water texture details that you have in the image, and then obviously the wave that kind of is the main feature and complement of it also. I like how he's bringing all this out. It's making it feel very much like you're just at the ocean with this bird, so it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool shot, Jeremy. I like that. I like what you did here. The splash of color is fun. It's just the patterns that the waves created back here. That's cool. Okay, I am going to call this.
Cool. So he saves that.
Let's jump into the next one. I decided to go for this interesting pelican. I really like the way that Jeremy isolated this bird right up in here. And you've got this all like blown out bokeh right here of something he was shooting through, which I think is super dope. So let's go right in here with some contrast, contrast here. I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do a linear. And I just want to pop up these shadows because this is very shadowy right in here. So I'm just going to bump that up a bit. And then create a new mask. Something like that, but I'm going to inverse this one. So there we go. I'm going to bring down the highlights just a little bit. The shadows, bump those up again, and then hit that with some go low. Bam. That looks good.
Okay. So what he just did there essentially was created a mask that's everything except the pelican to really bring out the warmth in kind of the brush around it, or the blown out, or sorry, not blown out, but blurred out bokeh that I had framing this pelican. So that's what he's been doing there essentially. And then also kind of flattening it a little bit so it's not quite so heavily contrasted in that blurred out area. So he brought up the shadows to not lose all the darkness in that kind of that black area right there. And then he's kind of pulling down those highlights to not get it too bright in the brighter areas of it.
To duplicate and inverse this, I'm going to drop the exposure, I think, because I think this should be like darker. So I'm going to hit some of this pelican in Lightroom, in in Photoshop and bring it out. I
Interesting.
think that could be really cool and darken up some of these rocks behind this bird. But for now, that's looking pretty good. Maybe bring this in just a little. There we go. All right, so bring a little bit more contrast to it, a little more warmth. Yeah, bring in some of those blacks.
So he's going definitely for like a moody edit on this Pelican.
Radial gradient
definitely
here.
not playing the bright side of it.
Except I'm going to subtract that part, and then I'm going to drop the exposure, something like that. That looks cool. I don't know if I need to crop this any, but let's see if I was going to crop. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm good with it. I'm going to leave it as is.
That's pretty good.
As shot, that's what I'm going to do. Because I do appreciate the thought that went into this shot. So, yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Let's try a little boost in saturation. Not much. A little saturation goes a whole long ways, guys. So I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. See what we can do.
Little saturation. That's a good little tidbit there.
Let's dive right in.
A little saturation goes a long ways. That's one of the biggest things I think I see in a lot of beginning editing is throwing up the saturation way too high or being scared to throw it up at all to where you just totally kind of lose it and pull it down. And there's a very, very fine balance on saturation specifically and bringing out vibrance and saturation where you want to just give it enough pop to make it just really stand out, but you don't want to overdo it to where it feels fake and pastel-y. So that's a good little tidbit there.
Go to the dodge tool, zoom in here, and I'm just going to start working on some of this. I'm just going to boost some of the color in here.
Cool.
I just want to match the rim lighting going on here. So, and yes, I'm doing this all with a thumb roller with my hand, which seems kind of crazy. All right, midtones. Just want to kind of hit these so they pop out a little bit more. Just want to give this bird some punch.
So essentially what he's doing is he was allowing the rest of it to be dark, as you saw in that previous masking that he was doing, but now he's trying to punch the highlights of this pelican, some of the midtones to really help pop the pelican amidst the darkness of the scene.
Look at that. Looks pretty good. Just brought out that bill just a bit more.
I like it.
Now we're going to go in and take down some of the... I think I need a place to actually like stop here, so I think it's going to be like this natural curve in the rock. So I'm going to take this down. I just want to bring in some contrast here so the bird pops out really well. There we go. This might be a little bit too much, but we'll see.
Okay, so he's really going for a dark mood around it.
So go in here and make some selections so I don't get this bird all weird. Make it look all stupid.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And he's probably going to inverse it.
Get a decent selection going here, and then I need to actually come in here, manually do this one. There we go. Clickety click. I like to try to get it pretty close to how it ought to, like feather detail and that sort of thing, because those things matter. In the end, it really, really does matter. If you're trying to go for like a really clean, good edit. And one of the things that I learned years ago, I used to do faux finishing in Nashville, Tennessee. And one of the things my mentor always taught me was to hide your tool. And by that she meant that nobody should know or be able to tell that you went in there with a paintbrush.
Yep.
Because they shouldn't see paintbrush marks. They shouldn't see trowel marks. They shouldn't see tools of the trade that got used. All they should see is the beautiful walls that you created for them. I don't do that sort of thing anymore, but that lesson stuck with me into photography, and especially regarding editing. No one should be able to tell that you did any Photoshop work. If they can, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, that's good.
Your Photoshop work should be very careful and precise, and if that means getting in here and clickety-clicking to get a good selection for an hour or so, then that's what you do. No, we're not going to take an hour to do this, because I'm speedy. But you get the point. Do your best. Make these edits count. I am just going to do this here. Okay. Inverse the selection.
Yep.
Now I can get to town and...
So what he just did was he just masked all that and then inversed it so that way now he can only affect what's in the mask for Photoshop. So now when he's doing all this dodging that he's doing, he's darkening everything, but he can push it right up to the edge of the mask and it still won't affect the pelican or the rocks that the pelican's on.
And no, I am not doing... this is the kind of edit that is destructive for sure. But I mean, I don't think it matters at this point. Not like Jeremy's going to keep this one. Okay, so now comes the work of like kind of fading something, right? We're going to make this look like it's... I'm going to drop the exposure on this brush, and now I'm just going to kind of fade this. I want it to just kind of fade in. You know what I could even do? Go into this. I could go into my history brush. And this is where...
It's an interesting style that he's going for here.
But I digress. You could do some like clever, little bits of light on this rock or something like this. Or, just hit the edges of these rocks a little bit. Just to give it a little bit of light. Essentially, like, we're just really painting with light, which I think is really, really cool. Just gonna hit a few more of these. All right, so yeah, looks pretty good. I need to get rid of that line because that looks tacky right there. So actually, I think that looks pretty decent. I think it brought out the bird enough. It darkened down too much. If I was going to do any more, I think I would just hit this corner here. Just down the sides here. But really, I don't need to do that much. Maybe take down that corner just a little bit so it's not quite so hot. There we go. I just don't want it to bring all the focus away from the bird. You know, it should complement the scene, not really detract. So maybe taking it down just a little bit. I love the color there, but I don't want it to be necessarily too bright that it like takes away from it. So let's save this one.
Yeah, I really I think my favorite part about this whole edit is how Jamin went through and very creatively decided to do that part over here where he's kind of darkening the scene behind the pelican, but then also particularly those accents in the rock. I've never kind of seen that or done that before. I've never seen that in someone's editing technique or done that before myself, how he's kind of decided to kind of accent those kind of crevices in the rock behind it. And I really, really like that because it makes the background feel much more 3D, but still very blurred and out of focus. So that it's not too distracting, right? So I love that about this in particular. So that's really cool, Jamin. So this next one is actually by Michael Wolf, and so the rest of the people didn't record their voices along with it, but we're just going to kind of watch what they wind up doing. It's by Michael Wolf, really good photographer as well, and we're going to kind of see how he does this. This one he did off of his iPad remotely, so we're just going to kind of take a look at how he does this. So he starts out with the tone curve, which I really like. I use a lot of tone curves in a lot of my edits. It's actually usually where I start. So I love that. What he's doing is kind of initially going for this mask, similar to Jamin, but in a very different type of way. So I should say he's using a mask like Jamin did, but very different stylistically. So I think what he's going for seems like, at least before he was going with bringing out some color, bringing out some light. Now he's kind of throwing a radial mask around the pelican itself, kind of bringing out some exposure in the pelican, I think to make the pelican pop a little bit more. So it's looking pretty good. Now he's going for some HSLs, trying to see how he can adjust those yellows to kind of make it a little bit more cohesive, maybe not contrast those green against those yellows so much, but rather kind of make them feel like they're a little bit more uniform of a color right there. And that radial mask specifically that he was throwing down there, so actually I'm gonna pull that back just a tad right there. That radial mask he's using to get that shadow out. Like you can see at the beginning, there's a lot of darkness down there. He's using that to get the shadow out down there, which I like that decision as well, because it helps kind of keep the bokeh less the attention of the frame and more just like a happy aesthetic complement to it. So I like that about this. He decided to crop in a little bit, get a little bit more intimate with the pelican. The oranges, he's doing the same thing. Greens, same. It seems like with a lot of those, the saturation, he's trying to actually pull it down and isolate it to where you're only getting some more simple colors in it, particularly that orangish yellow that he's looking at. So pretty cool. I like the results in that. That was a lot more quicker of an edit, right, than Jamin's was, but still very powerful and effective. Very kind of simplified in nature is how I would describe it best. Feels very simplified, like he got that bokeh out to where it's no longer a distraction at all, opposed from the subject. And just kind of made sure that the subject was really the focus of the frame as well, in just a different style of a way. It also feels like this image is a little bit more just centralized, like he pulled kind of the corners all a little bit darker and kept the middle more bright. So it feels a little bit more like your eye is naturally pulling towards the middle, whereas opposed to in Jamin's edit, he was allowing your eye to be a little bit more offset and looking towards the corner of the frame, and it felt more landscapey than maybe this image does. So now this is a different image, and so we're going to see what he does with this crow here. So immediately he starts by cropping it in to do a 2x3 portrait crop. Now he does some subject recognition for the masking. That way he can only affect the crow itself. It looks like he's wanting to bring out the feather detail in particular. And also make sure that there's enough exposure in the darkness of the crow to where you can see it well. Stylistically, it looks like he's going for, trying to figure out what type of mood he's going for. So he's kind of flattening it out here. That way the crow doesn't feel like it's too, I think he's trying to kind of blend it into where it feels like it's the same scene very much so. A little bit more naturally set into the scenario. This was a very foggy day, so maybe he's kind of trying to go for that as well. Very cold. He's definitely going for the cold now here. So it looks like with those HSL, he's doing a lot of HSL work right there. He's trying to isolate those colors to where it feels like really the demonstrative color in this image is that kind of that bluish overtone, because he's kind of pulling all those other colors a little bit out. So interesting choices there. And then as well as the rock, like I noticed he was kind of pulling the luminance up on some of those, I think to help pop the rock a little bit, and those rock colors, the oranges and yellows a little bit. It's committing a little bit further to that cold feel. In the subject, though, that's interesting. In the subject, he's deciding to keep it a little bit warmer than maybe what the rest of the image is perceived as. And he's trying to make sure, so what he's doing there, the reason for him doing, I'm going to back up just a second. The reason for him doing what he's doing right there is he's particularly trying to make sure that there's enough detail that you can see in the crow. So he's brought up the exposure in the crow and stuff like that, right? The shadows. But then he's pulled down the blacks to make sure there's still that contrast in the blacks and the dark end. Because one of the things you can get a lot of times, unfortunately, as a result of trying to recover a lot of exposure in the darkest parts of your images, is you can wind up flattening it out. And he's trying to make sure that he's not doing that. As well as his tone curve earlier, if you were looking at that, his tone curve, he was trying to make sure he was doing the same thing. Now he's throwing a little bit of a vignette in it. So even stylistically, between these two photos, you can see that he kind of likes that kind of centralization of your eye towards the middle of the frame. So it seems to be kind of like a style that he goes for a little bit more. So that was Michael Wolf's images. Some cool edits there as well. So appreciated getting to see those. And it's so interesting already getting to see the difference, particularly the Pelican, because we got to see them both edit those, right? And the Pelican is drastically different looking between the two different types of edits. Both of them look really great, but it looks very, very different between these two. One is a little bit more light and kind of monocolor. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but a little bit more light and monocolored versus the other one, so that was more Michael's, and then Jamin's was a little bit more dark and moody and landscape type of feeling. So, all right, so I told you guys, this is by a guy named Evan Watts, has an awesome YouTube channel called Watts Wildlife as well. Told you guys, this oyster catcher one, there's something to it that you just know you can work a lot with creatively, so a lot of people chose it. Here's another one by Evan Watts, and we have one more person who chose it coming up too. But Evan Watts chose this one as well, so he starts out with deciding how he wants to crop this. Looks like he does a little minor crop on it to set up the scene. I think he just wanted to kind of balance the bird a little bit higher up in the frame, maybe to match the thirds more, but was also careful not to cut off the wave up at the top up here. So important decision there. Actually, got to do the playback speed times 2. There we go. All right. So let's see. He's deciding, I think he's trying to decide how he wants to mask this up. He goes for a linear mask with deselecting the subject to make sure he doesn't affect that. And he's kind of going with the line, I think, of this kind of break in the wave back here. That's kind of what he's going with. Looks like he's actually, let's see. Feels like he's kind of taking away some of the distractions in those brighter areas. Bringing out that contrast between the bright and the dark. It looks like it ends with some details, and then he calls it good there. So this is kind of maybe a little bit more of what Jamin's original idea was, of that maybe he was going to pursue this type of an edit where it's a little bit warmer, that contrast between the blue and the warm temperature and the sunset behind it. But Jamin decided to go a different route. So this is kind of the first original idea that maybe Jamin had. But Evan just follows through with it, and you kind of see the result here. So I like this. This is really cool to see. And cool to see, again, that other style of edit. Okay, so now we got a photo of a Herman's Gull. So we haven't seen this one edited yet. So I'm excited to see how Evan approaches this. I think he's the only one who actually did this Herman's Gull edit. So let's see how he kind of tackled this. So he starts out by creating a mask around the subject, just a radial mask around the subject. We'll see kind of what he does with that later. Cool. So he's kind of bringing down. So he's going to decide, it looks like, at least so far, he's kind of deciding to keep A commitment to the background and making sure that the sky and the wave that you can slightly see in the background is still going to be in focus. He also darkens that foreground to keep that in order to keep that a little bit away from kind of being the focus on this image. So with that subject. So now he goes back to his mask on the subject itself. Make sure he brings out the contrast on that. He's moving quick. But yeah, he goes back. So let's actually back up a little bit. Goes back, he makes sure that he brings out the contrast there, the exposure, so you make sure the subject is very much still the feature of the image. So what he's kind of doing there. All right, let's see. So he's just kind of fine-tuning it, kind of seeing what the overall balance should be to this image now that he's chosen his masks, kind of chosen the dynamics and relationships between those different masks for the most part. Yeah, lots of masking in this one to make sure that the subject is really the attention of the frame, even though it's very small in the frame. So I like that. What I like particularly, so I'm going to pause it there. What I like particularly about this is that you kind of get to see that you don't necessarily have to be close up to a subject to keep it isolated, right? And these are different techniques you can use to still help make sure that the subject remains the attention of the frame, even when you're far away or you have a lot going on around it. So I really like how this edit is showing that. He's showing a bunch of different techniques he's using to make sure that the subject really still stays kind of the focal point and the key focus of the image. So very cool. Very cool. He's made the subject pop really well. I'm really happy with that. The subject very much is still where my attention goes as my eye looks at this image. So really cool. That's about it. Really cool edit by Evan. I like how he kind of did this. As opposed to the edit that I did, this is definitely a little bit darker and moodier. He actually hasn't seen the edit that I've done by this point, so he has no reference or frame of mind for it even. And unfortunately, no one else did it, so we can't really compare it to someone else's work. But I still like the results a lot. He did a really good job of keeping all this detail while still keeping a lot of contrast, making sure the subject is the center of the kind of the center of your attention as a viewer. And good job there by Evan. All right, so now we got Espen Helland, who sent over 2 images that he edited, and I'm really excited about this because Espen's also coming on as a podcast guest in 2 or 3 weeks from now onto Bird Burger, so it's going to be really cool. We're going to have a great conversation. He's a guy that probably a lot of you guys have followed, especially if you're an MFT user. He's kind of the number one guy out there on YouTube for the MFT genre for wildlife photography, so he's got some really cool stuff to say, and yeah, excited to take a look at this photo with him and see how he edited it up. So starting off with the crow again. So we've had 2 other people edit the crow, so let's see how he goes for it. So he starts by picking a profile. Okay, so he's starting off just in Topaz Photo AI. So he's going to start off with all the details rather than starting off necessarily with the color or anything else like that or getting his exposure properly. He's going to start off worrying about the details. So I like that. He decides to do the remove noise and sharpen. Does a really good job with the crow. Yeah, I mean, geez, this is why I love Photo AI, guys. It's incredible. You can tell that it just cleaned everything up immediately and then just kept that sharpness and that feather detail. That was just beautiful. I'm telling you, Photo AI should have got it while it was on sale. That's why I made that video for you guys. Hopefully you did. Which a lot of you guys did. I think we had, that was the most successful, I don't know if that's the right word. I'm going to pause it for a second. But I think that was the most successful or the most out of any video I've ever made. I think that link, I had like 70 people go to it and purchase it and download it afterwards, which is just insane. Usually I get 5 people that go and purchase something after I talk about it. But I think we had like 70 purchases or something, but it's because that program is really that good. Like I think people that downloaded the folders and the file or the images in the file that I kind of let people kind of see my, raw images, pull them up, digest them themselves. I think people were saying like, wow, this thing is for real. It's really good. So it's awesome. If you haven't checked that out, I'll throw that video in the description below on Topaz Photo AI. I'd highly recommend that you go check it out and get it if you don't have it already. So what's interesting about Espen is I think everyone else has started or done the details in their images last. Espen has definitely started by worrying about the details, and then now he's getting to color, and he hasn't gotten to exposure yet, but it seems like he'll probably get to that in a bit. So very interesting to see the order in which people do things in. So it's kind of getting it for a little bit colder of a feel is what it seems like he's been going for so far. He's kind of brightening up that rock a little bit. So it seems like he's kind of going for a little bit more flat of an image than what the others have gone for on the crows. Definitely more flat than Sergius. Sergius was just bringing out that contrast like crazy. Michael was also bringing out a lot of contrast. But Espen seems to really be going for the flatness so far. Unless he's going to do something that's tricking me and throwing me up last minute. It seems like he's really flattening it out quite a lot. So I think he really wants to be able to see the subject very, very much and be able to see all that. He's going to do some highlighting on the eye, some little accents on the wings as well. Like those decisions. Figuring out some last minute kind of details on it is what it looks like. Interesting. So he's going to create that mask. He's going to darken everything around that. That's a nice little choice. I like that accent there. I think that does a lot. That looks like it's a very minor little thing that he just did, but that'll do a lot to the image because otherwise I think the flatness might have been too much. So that's a good choice there. Really pulls down those blacks a little bit to make sure that we get a little bit of contrast in that crow. It's one of the hardest parts I think about crows is how do you make sure that their feather details are still seen but contrasted well. So that's cool. I like that result, and that's a different result than the other two for sure. That's definitely the furthest out of those 3 crow edits that we've seen, but I like it. Just different, and very cool to see. All right, so we're gonna see what he does here with this oyster catcher. So again, he goes into the details first. Different from how everyone else was editing it. That's why it's so important to find kind of what you test things out. Like test things out, you guys that are watching. Test things out, kind of find what you like, and then go for it from there. I didn't even see what he did right there, actually. Let's see. He decided to just remove the noise. So he didn't decide to sharpen, just remove noise. Okay, so now he does a subject mask. Okay, so it looks like he's going to be trying to keep exposure, at least a little bit in the oyster catcher, rather than go for a silhouette vibe. Interesting. That'll be different from everyone else's choices so far, if he follows through with that. He's brightening up the bottom of the wave. Okay. So again, so you can already see, like, as I'm watching this, I'm cracking up in my brain because I'm like, you can tell that people have these styles that they're going for, right? So Espen seems to like a little bit more flat of a style where you can really see all the details of everything versus, some of the others. Jamin likes a very hard contrast style. Sergius likes that very dark and moody style. So it's so interesting seeing those differences. I think maybe Evan's a little bit closer to Espen. He's definitely not as close to Espen in terms of how flat he likes it, but Evan is a little bit more on the everything in exposure style, but definitely not all the way. What is he going to do here? Looks like he's brightening up these rocks. So he is literally trying to recover this detail. So this is completely different from what the other people were doing on the oyster catcher. So very, very interesting to see. I do like, though, how he is brightening up the bottom of this wave. You kind of see a little bit more in the wave that you couldn't see before. Like particularly that bokeh right there is really nice. Just kind of the way the wave forms, kind of cool. He's bringing out the beak, kind of brightening up the beak and the eye. A little bit of that shoulder. Really interesting to see. Wow. Very cool. I love it. Just in a tint. It's kind of just picking some parts and kind of just doing some little bit of adding a little bit of dynamic to how that exposure moves throughout the frame and the color maybe. So really interesting to see that. Very cool. And it looks like he's got a little bit more. Gonna mess with those HSLs a little bit. I think he's trying to decide what is he going for here exactly in terms of how saturated he wants this. I like that, how you got to see there for a moment, how he's just playing with those HSLs and just sliding them back and forth. That's a great way to just kind of learn what your things are doing, and kind of get oriented on your frame and or your image and what's going on in the image. So that's a great thing to do. Bring up the exposure there a little bit. On the kind of the top of that wave, it feels like. Helps to find that wave a little bit more, and I like that. All right, very cool. So that's it. That's Espen's edit. I like it. It's very different from the rest, and it's cool to see how unique each of these can be. So this last one, we got Nathan Watson, who is actually the winner of the Bird Burger Photo Awards this year. So I wanted to invite him back on to show kind of his editing workflow as well amongst everyone else. And so hopefully you guys will get some value out of this. So Nathan is also seemingly going to start off with some detail adjustments as well. So Espen's not the only one anymore, but it seems like it's a very brief detail adjustment. Kind of getting a general layout. So he's pulling the highlights all the way down. Interesting. So he's pulling the highlights all the way down. That way he can make some tone curve adjustments that will affect the image and really control it. So what he's doing essentially there is he's trying to pull down those highlights so that way they don't get accidentally blown out. But now what he's going to do is create that contrast through the tone curves. And he's actually pulling out some masks. That way these things right here in particular don't accidentally get too bright, because he felt like these were popping too much. I think that's why he was pointing that out earlier. So very interesting to see that. Cool to see. So Nathan's really going a lot for it. So what he's doing is a lot of exposure adjustments specifically to certain parts of the image. So that's very cool to see. A lot of detail work. Okay. So he's picking out that little speck there. All right. So he's doing a lot of tone curve work, which I like. I love tone curves. Tone curves are like my favorite thing. I think they're the most powerful tool that you have in a lot of editing programs, personally. But he's really taking it to the next level. This is his third tone curve where he's adjusting specific parts of the frame and doing his exposure adjustments via tone curve rather than the typical basic stuff that you have options on for the side. So very interesting to see all that stuff. And I know Nathan likes to go for a natural looking edit. That's definitely his thing. So I know he doesn't like to do too much that will especially make it not look natural, is what he's told me. So he kind of wants to bring out what was already actually there. But he's helping refine just what was there, kind of getting rid of those small little accidental mistakes. So what he's doing right here actually is he's masking and selecting the parts of the bird that might accidentally get blown out. You can see on the tone curve, or kind of lost in the detail. That's what he's trying to do, is push it out. So you can see on the tone curve right here before where some of the silhouette is accidentally staying in detail. He's just making sure to, so let's go back here for a second. He's making sure to cut it out, and he's just picking up those leftover pieces and making sure that those parts of the silhouette are out, so it's completely black and uniform and you don't accidentally see any detail left in it. So looks like he wound up just saving it. Yep. And going from there. And let's move on to the last one. So now we got Nathan. He pulled up the crow as well. So we had the crow being chosen to be edited again. So here brings up the warmth a little bit to start out. I think that's what he did. Maybe he didn't actually. Maybe it was already at that preset. But he starts again with those basic kind of detail adjustments. Interesting choice here. Okay. So he actually cools it down a little bit. Yep. And then let's see what he does next. He's doing a lot pretty quick. So again, he's doing some tone curves. So I think essentially what he's done from the bat is just made sure that this is really contrasted and the color temperature is kind of what he wants it to be at. Okay, so it looks like what he's going to do is bring out some more contrast in the rock. This was a foggy day, so the contrast wasn't necessarily there in the actual shot, so he's just trying to make sure that the parts that he wants contrasted are contrasted. So he just brought out the contrast in the rock with that mask. Or, sorry, I should say everything around it, actually. Everything around that. Okay. Looks like he used essentially like a denoising program. That's actually not one I'm familiar with, but... So he just denoised it. Cool. He's doing a good job of retaining that noise in, or sorry, the detail in the crow. Love the detail that he's retaining in it. Decides to reframe it, pull it in a little bit more just to keep the focus maybe a little bit more in on the subject, while also kind of centering that rock in the middle of the frame. At least middle horizontally. Doing some last minute detail adjustments. Got a lot of color in the background, which I like, without accidentally overcoloring that rock. So that's a good call there. I like it. Yep. Kind of what I thought he was going to do. He's taking out a little bit of that color in the rock. Then again, he's bringing out that contrast all around. Yep, in the water. I like that. That's a good choice there. So very cool to see. All right, and it looks like that's about it for Nathan. So that's an awesome photo. That I like that one. That's also very different again from the kind of, we had two very, very moody edits on the crow. And then we had Espen's that was very, very flat. And then this one's kind of, I think, the most in the middle of all of them. So it's interesting to see, once again, those editing styles. And this kind of was more in the color scheme that kind of Espen went for as well. So kind of interesting to just see all those differences between those. So I love it. Woo! So this video was really long, guys. I hope that this video really helped you guys out to learn new creative editing techniques. Thanks so much to Espen, Jamin, Sergius, Nathan, Evan, and Michael for agreeing to share their editing workflow on camera. It can be something that sometimes a lot of people want to keep private and hidden, so it's really cool that they were just willing to do so. So appreciate that. It would be awesome if you guys took the time to check out their work, as well as a thank you for the time they spent on this. And if you enjoyed what you saw today, I'd be honored if you subscribe to Birdburger to see more helpful content like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.